Now, the wildfires and evacuations come just days after the provincial writ was dropped. And to discuss how the current state of emergency in Alberta may affect the upcoming provincial vote, we're now joined by two journalists who are covering the campaign quite closely. Elise von Scheel is a provincial affairs reporter for the CBC. She's also the producer of the West of Centre podcast. And Alex Boyd reports for the Toronto Star's Calgary Bureau. Hello to both of you.
Hi.
Hello.
Now, of course, this political campaign is arguably more of an annoyance to anyone who's been forced to evacuate their homes. But given that we are a political program, I do wonder how this disaster is affecting the first days of campaigning. Alex, I'll get you to start us out here.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, there's 25,000 people in Alberta right now who can't go home, who are probably not thinking a whole lot about politics right now. But it is having a huge effect both politically and non-politically. I mean, when you look at the numbers, I think it's so clear what's happening in Alberta right now is very unusual. I had a look at the provincial database this morning. There's 100 active fires currently lit here in the province. There's been 400 since the beginning of the year, an absolutely whopping 400,000 hectares of land burned. And this is causing huge problems across the province. There's been campaigns that have been suspended in areas that are particularly hard hit by fire. I know there's at least one MLA who has said that there are fires, multiple fires actually bearing down on his land. So he's had to pull back. So logistically, it's been a real problem. Both campaigns have said that they hope to go ahead. They hope that the election will be able to go ahead as planned. But at the same time, Elections Alberta may have to make tweaks in terms of local accommodations if people, frankly, just aren't able to get to the polls. But more broadly, I mean, the fires have pulled focus over, whatever the heck the parties thought they were going to be talking about the first election of the campaign. We've seen a few kind of fragile signs of bipartisanship, which feels a little bit unusual in Alberta right now. There's a photo from yesterday of Premier Danielle Smith and Rachel Notley seated at the same table having a discussion about what's going on with the fires, which makes sense, of course. Rachel Notley is the leader of the opposition. She was also premier in 2016 when fires ripped through Fort McMurray. So evacuation and fire management is something that she knows a little something about. So we've seen them, fragilely come together a little bit. But at the same time, at a time when managing disasters like this are increasingly a part of the premier's job here in Alberta. In the last decade, we've seen major flooding, we've seen major fires, we've seen COVID, obviously. At a time when questions of leadership are a big part of the campaign, Danielle Smith is really going to be in the spotlight in terms of her ability to manage a crisis.
Yeah, and of course, this is such a short campaign, at least. We're talking about 4 weeks here. And when you look at that time period, everything and anything can affect the outcome or how people feel. What are you hearing about the impact of this fire so far, or these fires rather, so far on the campaign?
It can be a plus and a minus, and both can exist at the same time. And to Alex's point, if your ranch is on fire, if you are in a hotel because you've been evacuated, you're probably not paying a lot of attention to what's going on. And I know that both campaigns, when the election started out, were thinking about this as a possibility, right? They were looking at the fire reports and at the weather and thinking, fires might actually end up being a question in this election. So it knocks people off message, right? Anytime, especially in a short campaign, that you're not able to win the day, as they like to say, anytime that you're not the one controlling the messaging, it can be a lost opportunity to gain momentum in a short campaign. But at the same time, looking at that photo of Danielle Smith and Rachel Notley kind of coordinating over this emergency, you can see how it's possible that voters, as they are going through these weeks and as we are dealing with these fires here in Alberta, are going to be asking themselves a different question. We know that they are asking questions of the leaders on healthcare and on the economy, but a new question that's going to be brought out of these fires for voters might just be, if a disaster strikes, who do I want in charge of the province?
Well, and that does go down to leadership, Elise. I'm wondering, when you look at these women, both of whom are very well known in the province, talk to us about the strengths and the weaknesses, Elise, that both Danielle Smith and Rachel Notley bring to the forefront, especially given this current situation where leadership is so important.
Well, it's a unique situation. It really doesn't happen outside of Quebec, that a leader is the premier and then loses, stays on as the opposition leader, and comes back for another round to what Rachel Notley is doing. And it's a unique situation. Both women are women. We've got two leaders who have also been in that premier's office and are fighting for a chance to get back there. And so it's the unique situation where you can't draw too much attention to your opponent's record because they can equally draw attention to yours. Both leaders have things that they have done and have said that have been clearly and deeply unpopular with people. And so that is going to be a factor in this campaign, as well as the fact that they are both they both have very strong personalities and are both very, very good communicators. And so when you're looking at how the issues play out, they're pretty evenly matched on a lot of things. And so when it comes to this fire, when you've got both with some experience managing these things, and voters are looking for that little bit extra, a time like this is where some of those questions can, I think, be settled.
Yeah, Alex, what would you say about the strengths and the weaknesses of each party leader in this one?
I think it's interesting when you look at kind of how each leader relates to her party, because when you look at Danielle Smith, I think a lot of observers have cast her as more of a liability. She is someone who has a history of making controversial statements, is a little bit more untested in terms of her ability to kind of step up and be that face of trusted leadership, as opposed to her party, which is, a well-known brand in Alberta and one that does tend to get voters out to the polls and a little bit more excited. When you compare that to Rachel Notley, the polls seem to suggest that she is often more popular as a leader, as a person, but then her party is something that, is a little bit more untested or is viewed a little bit more skeptically within the province. I mean, if you look at the election signs that are all over the province right now, the Conservative signs say nothing about Danielle Smith. The Orange NDP signs, of course, all have the Team Rachel Notley banner on them. So in terms of the relationship to leader to party, we're looking at slightly different situations here. Rachel Notley obviously has stood up and led through a fire before. We know that, these sorts of situations can often make or break a leader. The Calgary mayor, Naheed Nenshi, obviously was forged in the Calgary floods, and that was something that got him a lot of prominence, the way he was able to lead through that situation. So in some ways, I think, Danielle Smith is really going to be in the spotlight here, but it's opportunity too, because at a time when her personal ability to lead, her credibility as someone in the premier's chair is sometimes something that's questioned. How she manages herself in the coming days and weeks could have a real impact.
Listen, I've only have about a minute left here, but I do want to get an answer from each one of you, because as you know, when it comes to political campaigns ahead of an election, it's often what is not planned that becomes the defining issue that affects the outcome at the end of the day. Do you think this fire will be, or these wildfires will be, the defining issue? Again, given just how short this campaign is. Elise, I'll begin with you.
That I'm not sure about, and especially because they're concentrated to a specific geographical area. So if you're talking about Calgary, where everybody says the battleground is going to be, we aren't so much affected by the fires down here. I think the broader themes that the fire could establish when it comes to leadership will be a big factor in the campaign. I think consistently what we've been seeing in polling, which is that healthcare and the economy are prevailing issues, will continue to be more of a defining factor, and the defining factor will be who can win over that kind of mushy middle of voters who might not ever want to be lifetime NDP voters, but who have been looking at Smith and don't necessarily trust her to be stable. And so I think those factors, and however the fire may or may not play into them, it could become an issue. But those more consistent issues, I think, are what people are talking about who are outside of the fire zone. Alex, last 30 seconds to you.
I mean, whether it's going to be the defining issue, I think it's too early to say. Alberta campaigns have a way of they are twists and turns, shall we say. So it's hard to know what's going to happen between now and May 29th. But in terms of these questions of leadership, I think it's going to have an impact there.
Okay, well, we're watching and really glad to have both of you on. Hope we speak again before this campaign is done. But right now, Alex Boyd, Elise von Scheel, thank you very much for the time this evening.
Thanks for having us.